June 4, 1942. 10:52 a.m. Japanese carrier Hiryu, positioned 150 miles northwest of Midway. Lieutenant Mio Kobayashi's fingers shook as he made marks on his navigation chart, his pencil pausing over points that made no sense. Looking through the porthole of the ready room, he could observe Admiral Yamaguchi Tamon examining reconnaissance images, his face showing utter disbelief. It was not rage or uncertainty, but a revelation that something essential had disastrously failed. This couldn't be. We saw her destroyed at Coral Sea. I witnessed her burning, tilting, deserted. The picture revealed an American carrier launching planes. Its unique island profile was recognizable even through the blurred photograph. 3 carriers. The Americans had brought 3 carriers to Midway, not just 2. The arithmetic of certain victory 4 Japanese carriers against 2 American had just been undone. At Coral Sea 27 days before, Japanese airmen had left this very carrier fatally damaged, leaking oil, dead in the water. Admiral Takagi sent word to Tokyo. Yorktown-class carrier destroyed. The naval staff removed her from planning. Yet now, USS Yorktown appeared very much functional, already sending her planes down upon the Japanese task force. Kobayashi could hear turmoil racing through Hiryu via the intercom. 3 American carriers amounted to 230 planes, not 150. 3 meant the trap had now been sprung on themselves. 3 changed everything. Japanese naval intelligence's assurances about American repair capability had been fatally incorrect. The sight of Yorktown at Midway introduced an unsolvable contradiction, undermining the Japanese conviction about what was possible industrially. According to the Imperial Navy's doctrine, proper battle repairs required extreme care, months of labor, honor-driven craftsmanship. A carrier struck with a 551-pound bomb that punched through 5 decks, ruptured fuel reservoirs, and wrecked entire compartments ought to need a minimum of 90 days at a premier naval facility. The numbers had been clear. Only Enterprise and Hornet were listed as active American carriers in the Pacific. Lexington had sunk at Coral Sea's bottom. Saratoga was still in repair after torpedo damage. The latest Essex-class carriers were not due until 1943. Japanese intelligence had corroborated this numerous times. Yet numbers were meaningless to the SBD Dauntless dive bombers now hurling themselves at Japanese carrier decks. As Admiral Nagumo's staff members feverishly recalculated, one reality became apparent. The entirety of Operation MI had rested on the belief that the Americans could not achieve what they just had. Before the deception at Coral Sea, May 8, 1942, Coral Sea, 500 miles to the northeast of Australia. The attack had been executed flawlessly. 18 Type 99 dive bombers from Shoku and Zuikaku tracked down USS Yorktown as it came out of a squall. Lieutenant Commander Kakuichi Takahashi, who headed the attack, watched his pilots hit the carrier directly near its island. A 250-kilogram bomb pierced through the flight deck and went off 5 decks below. The explosion was visible even from 10,000 feet above. Yorktown began to limp away, leaving a 10-meter streak of oil, bow down, flames visible through gaping holes. Her speed decreased to what Japanese spotters assessed as just 6 knots. Pilots returning to Japanese ships reported her doom, listing so heavily that landing operations were ruled out. Photos showed destroyers approaching for rescue. Admiral Takagi Teo radioed Fleet Headquarters. Both American carriers had been reported as sunk. Yorktown and Lexington destroyed. The Emperor received the message. Naval planners in Kerr then took Yorktown out of the order of battle. In their plans for Midway, she no longer counted. Captain Elliot Buckmaster, in command of Yorktown, intended otherwise. As his ship limped away at 20 knots, not the 6 knots the Japanese reported, his damage control crews began their first extraordinary job. The bomb immediately killed 66 sailors, destroyed 6 separate compartments, smashed elevator machinery, and broke open fuel tanks over 30 frames. By any naval engineering measure, Yorktown was supposed to need months in dry dock. The trip home, the first in a string of miracles, occurred May 8 to 27, 1942. From Coral Sea to Pearl Harbor, a 3,300-mile journey revealed a new kind of American industrial approach. Despite Yorktown's severe wounds, her sailors undertook repairs using a philosophy unfamiliar to the Japanese. Make it work, make it quickly, make it combat-ready. Chief Carpenter Boyd Mackenzie set aside standard damage control guides. Rather than wait for proper replacement of broken beams, a job for dry dock, he simply welded plates of steel across the damage, resulting in unsightly but sturdy patches. Similar improvisation happened within the engine compartments. The bomb had wiped out the second elevator's machinery and damaged 3 of the boilers. The ship's engineers rebuilt systems using scrounged parts, fabricated pieces from scrap metal, and jury-rigged devices intended for unrelated equipment. Yorktown kept up 20 knots despite damages expected to reduce her to 12, while American submarines reported her progress to Pearl Harbor. Japanese signals intelligence picked up these encrypted transmissions, but using their own standards, decided a damaged ship meant speeds of just 5 to 8 knots. Their computations showed she would only reach Pearl Harbor in mid-June, much too late for repairs before the Midway campaign set for June 4. Pearl Harbor, where the unimaginable became reality. May 27, 1942, at 1 p.m., Pearl Harbor Naval Base. The arrival of the Yorktown provided a grim picture. A 10-mile-long oil slick stretched from Diamond Head. She was listing to port, with wisps of smoke trailing from makeshift patches. Rear Admiral Aubrey Fitch, having seen the destruction directly, sent a cable with his evaluation. A minimum of 90 days was needed to restore the ship for combat. Yet, by May 1942, Pearl Harbor was no longer a tranquil peacetime base. It was something completely new. It operated as a frontline repair base pushing the limits of the possible. Refloating the battleships after December 7 had produced a workforce that measured time in hours, not months. Admiral Chester Nimitz greeted the Yorktown at dockside. In contrast to Japanese admirals who led from battleships stationed hundreds of miles to the rear, Nimitz waded through oil-coated waters of Dry Dock No. 1, closely inspecting the injuries as the dock filled. With trousers drenched and hands stained black with oil, he addressed Captain Claude Gillette, superintendent of the yard, and Lieutenant Commander H.J. Finstig, a hull repair specialist. "We have to return this ship to service in 3 days." The silence that descended felt endless. At last, Finstig swallowed hard and responded, "Yes, sir." Station hypo, an intelligence necessity. The 3-day time limit had clear reason. In the basement of Building 1, only 400 yards from the dry dock, Commander Joseph Rochefort at Station Hypo had decrypted JN-25, the Japanese Naval Operational Code. The team had decoded that AF designated Midway. The strike date, June 4, was known. The Japanese order of battle was also clear: 4 carriers of the 1st Air Fleet. More vital, they knew the Japanese were counting on encountering only the Enterprise and the Hornet. The Japanese were convinced Yorktown was destroyed. This intelligence made the urgency of Yorktown's restoration a matter of survival. Lacking her, U.S. forces would be facing 4 ships to 2. With her present, the odds were 3 to 4, not promising, but feasible. The 72-hour race, May 28, 5:30 a.m. Dry Dock No. 1. Even before the dock was fully pumped dry, with water still swirling ankle-high, 1,400 workers rushed aboard Yorktown. Every shop on base contributed personnel: welders, electricians, shipfitters, machinists, pipe fitters, and sheet metal workers all participated. Many had just finished night shifts on other vessels. They would labor 72 hours non-stop. The methods used went against everything in Japanese industrial doctrine. Instead of detailed planning and rigid approvals, the repairs proceeded in organized chaos. Supervisors made snap decisions. Workers performed duties across trades. The sole directive: make her ready to fight. Japanese naval engineers would have been appalled by the techniques. The bomb strike, The 551-pound bomb wrought havoc from the flight deck down 5 levels. By Japanese procedure, all damaged steel would be cut away, new sections fabricated, and each deck reconstructed. Time needed: 30 days. Pearl Harbor's tactic: leave the ruined structures, weld massive plates over them all, and reinforce shaky spots with construction site lumber. Time taken: 18 hours. Fuel tank near misses had burst tanks across 30 frames, fouling fuel stocks. Japanese rules dictated draining, thorough cleaning, detailed inspection, and repairing each tank. Estimated time: 2 weeks. The American method: remove tainted fuel, use rapid setting cement designed for runways to plug leaks, cover everything with more steel plating, and simply seal up tanks that were unrecoverable. Task complete in 11 hours. The machinery: damage struck 3 boiler rooms. Superheat ability dropped 70%. Top speed reduced to 27 knots, down from 32.5. Japanese standards called for all new components. Pearl Harbor's fix: superheaters were ignored, the lower speed accepted, and efforts concentrated on getting her running. Time: 14 hours. Life for the workers. Electrician Lewis Walters, 21, would later recall, proper repairs took too much time. We ran cable right over the decks, not through conduits. Instead of cutting out damaged parts, we fixed plates over holes. Everything was a stopgap ugly, but it worked. The numbers behind the repair: 20 tons of steel plates were welded on, 35 miles of wire was strung, 400 tons of fouled fuel were pumped out, 3 ruined compartments blocked off, and the constant arc welding drew enough power to trigger rolling blackouts on Oahu. The teams ate while working and napped in 15-minute bursts against the ship's bulkheads. Welding drained so much electricity that local hospitals lost current. Civilians on Oahu accepted blackouts without protest. When the yard needed timber, contracting firms supplied it no paperwork necessary. Hull repairs flouted basic naval architecture. Burst seams were wedged with timber, covered by steel, then welded over, forming what an engineer termed a metal scab. Electric work abandoned all standard practices. Cables ran along decks, through open hatches, and across the ceilings. The departure: May 30, 1942. At 9 a.m. Yorktown got underway with shipyard hands still on board, carrying on repairs as she gained velocity. These men disembarked only when she cleared harbor limits. The air group assembled on her deck was proof of improvisation bombing Squadron 3 from USS Saratoga, Torpedo Squadron 3 cobbled from survivors, and Fighting Squadron 3 made up of pilots from 3 units who had never flown together before. As Yorktown steamed away from Pearl Harbor, the men who had worked this miracle stood lined up on the docks. Chief Hull Technician Finstig would later remark, "We sent her out looking like a boxer patched up between bouts. She didn't look good, but she could still fight." Point Luck Rendezvous, June 2, 1942. 325 miles to the northeast of Midway, Yorktown joined up with Enterprise and Hornet at Point Luck. Crews on the other carriers were amazed. Commander W.D.E. McCluskey, the air group commander from Enterprise, remembered, "We knew Yorktown had suffered at Coral Sea. We thought she'd limp in as a backup. Instead, she was launching planes, conducting flight ops, and appeared ready for combat." Admiral Frank Jack Fletcher, who headquartered himself on Yorktown, realized something essential. Yorktown's presence was not simply a matter of adding planes. It threatened all prior Japanese assumptions. In his closing briefing, Fletcher told his officers, "The Japanese have spent months organizing this strike, every detail designed to face 2 carriers. But when our airmen appear above their fleet, that certainty ends." Japanese certainty. On the Akagi flagship, Admiral Nagumo Chuichi finished his detailed preparations with total faith in victory. 4 carriers Akagi, Kaga, Sōryū, Hiryu with 248 planes to attack 2 American carriers with 150 planes. Pearl Harbor veterans were facing Americans with no carrier battle victories. Captain Minoru Jinda, Nagumo's chief of air operations, had tested every contingency in war games. Even allowing for surprise, he believed Japanese skill in superior numbers would succeed. Only the appearance of a third American carrier could upset their predictions, and intelligence affirmed that could not occur. Yorktown had been accounted for as lost. Commander Mitsuo Fuchida, who led the Pearl Harbor raid, though ailing from appendicitis, watched as an observer. Many years onward, he would admit, "Our whole plan relied on intelligence that the Americans possessed 2 carriers. Not nearly 2, not a possible 3, exactly 2. If this was false, the entire plan failed." June 4, the turning point. At 4:30 a.m., Japanese carriers sent out 108 aircraft to hit Midway. The day began as scripted. Nagumo kept 108 more aircraft ready to strike the U.S. fleet, sure of catching them off guard. At 7:10 a.m., a Japanese scout plane reported, "American carrier spotted." The expectation was to find a single carrier. Nagumo ordered that the ready aircraft be reloaded with torpedoes to attack ships. Then ambiguity arose. The scout clarified, "It appears there are 2 carriers still within expectations." At 8:20 a.m., Torpedo Squadron. 8 planes from Hornet made attacks. Lieutenant Commander John Waldron directed 15 TBD Devastators toward the Japanese fleet without any fighter cover. Every one of the 15 was destroyed. Only Ensign George Gay managed to survive. Nevertheless, Waldron's loss caused the Japanese Combat Air Patrol to descend to sea level. At 8:40 a.m., Torpedo Squadron 6 from Enterprise launched their assault. Out of 14 Devastators, 10 were shot down. There were no hits, but again, the defending Zeros were pulled down low. At 9:15 a.m., another Torpedo Squadron, this time from Yorktown, conducted their attack. This was the turning point. As 12 additional Devastators commenced their approach, Japanese lookouts tallied the attacking planes. There were too many. The figures did not add up. There were 3 American carriers present, not 2. On Hiru's bridge, Admiral Yamaguchi did calculations quickly. The presence of 3 carriers altered everything. However, before fresh orders could be given and before the Japanese could adapt, the dive bombers appeared. At 10:22 a.m., the pivotal moment arrived. Lieutenant Commander Maxwell Leslie, commanding Yorktown's Bombing Squadron 3, had become lost but then located the Japanese by trailing a destroyer's wake. His 17 Solomon Islands Dauntlesses reached the Japanese fleet at the identical time as Enterprise's bombers, not as a result of planning, but due to Yorktown's delayed takeoff after her boilers were damaged. From 14,000 feet, Leslie gazed down at all 4 Japanese carriers, their flight decks filled with armed and fueled planes. Their fighters remained at sea level. Within 6 minutes, 3 of the Japanese carriers were ablaze. Sōryū, struck by 3 bombs from Leslie's squadron, burst into flames, the fire visible from 50 miles away. Japanese retaliation, assaulting a ghost. Admiral Yamaguchi aboard Hiru faced impossible circumstances, his lone carrier against 3 American carriers. Nonetheless, he ordered 18 dive bombers and 6 fighters to attack Yorktown, the closest American carrier. As this assault neared, mission leader Lieutenant Mo Kobayashi scrutinized the carrier with binoculars and was shocked. The island arrangement, the flight deck layout. This was Yorktown, the same ship supposedly sunk at Coral Sea. At 12:05 p.m., 3 bombs struck Yorktown, igniting blazes and rupturing steam pipes. The vessel lost power. It was now the second instance in 27 days that Japanese aviators left Yorktown on fire and, apparently, finished. But despite being ablaze, Yorktown had already made an irreversible impact. Her morning raid destroyed Sōryū. By absorbing Hiru's attacks, she had shielded Enterprise and Hornet, making possible the counterattack that would sink Hiryu 4 hours afterwards. Excellence in damage control. Captain Buckmaster commanded damage evaluation. The extemporized and unsightly Pearl Harbor repairs had stayed intact. The welded panels held firm. Chief Engineer John F. Delaney reported, "The Japanese bombs have hurt us, but the Pearl Harbor repairs are holding strong." Just give me 2 hours. In less than an hour, 3 boilers were reignited, fires managed, and counter-flooding corrected the list. By 1:40 p.m., Yorktown was moving at 19 knots, replenishing fighters, and looked so restored that when Hiru's second assault arrived at 2:30 p.m., its pilots thought they were striking a different, undamaged carrier. The confusion of the second wave. At 2:30 p.m., Lieutenant Tominaga Joy led the only 5 torpedo bombers Hiru had remaining, expecting to encounter a burning Yorktown. Instead, he discovered a carrier underway, launching fighters. His ambiguous message to Hiru implied they were attacking an additional carrier, prompting Japanese staff to suspect a 4th American carrier. Although Tominaga's torpedoes would eventually doom Yorktown, this muddle prevented a cohesive Japanese reaction before Enterprise's dive bombers found and destroyed Hiru at 5 p.m. The conclusion. On June 6 at 1:31 p.m., Japanese submarine I-168, under Lieutenant Commander Yohachi Tanabe, located Yorktown being towed. Tanabe launched 4 torpedoes. 2 struck Yorktown, while 1 hit the destroyer USS Hammond nearby. As Yorktown capsized on June 7, Tanabe wrote in the log that an American carrier, likely Saratoga, had been sunk. Even as she went down, Yorktown sowed confusion. The Japanese never truly grasped that the carrier at Midway was the same one they believed destroyed at Coral Sea. The unchanging math, the numbers reveal the facts. Japanese projection for similar repairs: 90 to 120 days. The American peacetime norm: 30 to 45 days. Actual turnaround: 72 hours. The crew: 1,400 working non-stop. Combat readiness achieved: 85%. Battle consequences: Japanese expectation: 4 carriers versus 2 indicated certain triumph. Reality: 4 carriers versus 3 meant an even match. Outcome: 4 Japanese carriers sunk, 1 American lost. Strategic force multiplier: Sōryū was definitely sunk by Yorktown's planes. Yorktown absorbed 2 Japanese airstrikes that otherwise would have targeted Enterprise or Hornet. 75 Japanese aircraft were downed assaulting Yorktown. The Japanese ability to attack was permanently eliminated. Testimonies from eyewitnesses. Decades later, those who participated reflected on Yorktown's role. Commander Mitsuo Fuchida, Japanese: "The arrival of a 3rd carrier wrecked our plans. All our calculations and scenarios assumed only 2. When Lookout spotted more torpedo aircraft than 2 carriers could send, we knew something was wrong. By the time we realized, 3 of our carriers were gutted." Aviation machinist Tom Cheek, USS Enterprise: "When we saw Yorktown at Point Luck, even grown men cheered for real. We all realized she'd taken severe damage at Coral Sea, but she was there, patched like a battered boxer, prepared for a new fight." Electrician Wayne Morrison, Pearl Harbor: "Hearing she'd played a part in sinking 3 Japanese carriers before being hit caused the entire yard to fall silent. Then, applause erupted. Soon, 10,000 workers were clapping. Those 3 days meant the world." Japanese understanding. Over time, the Japanese came to comprehend what had happened, but full clarity required years. Admiral Mate Ugaki, Yamamoto's chief of staff, recorded in his diary, "Yorktown's presence at Midway was not luck. It was preparation. The Americans must have been aware of our strategy. The 72-hour repair wasn't a miracle. It resulted from intelligence." In 1962, Lieutenant Commander Tanner Bay went to Pearl Harbor. He was shown Dry Dock 1, where Yorktown had been repaired. He stood in silence for several minutes, then stated, "Now I see. We weren't just fighting a country. We were fighting an ethos that everything is possible if you're willing to work. We placed trust in spirit over matter. The Americans had faith in matter, properly harnessed." Admiral Shigeru Fukudome in his autobiography, "Yorktown proved to us that the war was lost before it truly started. Any state able to mend such damage in just 3 days couldn't be bested by any country needing 3 months for the same. It was arithmetic. Repair philosophies. The restoration of Yorktown exposed deep distinctions in Japanese versus American approaches. Japanese ideology. Perfection, meticulous craft, honor in every facet. Damaged vessels must be completely restored, with time being secondary to meticulousness. The American view. Function, rapidity, adaptability. Crippled ships simply needed to be battle-ready, not aesthetically pleasing. Timing was crucial. This difference reflected in areas beyond ship repair. Japanese aircraft were exquisitely designed, individually assembled. American planes were sufficient, constructed by the thousands, endlessly interchangeable, fixable by any means available. The intelligence factor. Station hypos codebreaking made it urgent to repair Yorktown, but the actual fixing rendered the intelligence actionable. Without Yorktown, Admirals Nimitz and Fletcher might have avoided the engagement. Having her present made the risks worthy. Commander Rochefort later remarked, "We could intercept their communications, but interpretation was worthless unless we could respond. Yorktown gave us that decisive ability. Those naval workers were as key as the codebreakers." The lasting effect. Yorktown's restoration transformed naval damage control. Speed was preferred over flawlessness. Practicality became the tenet. Ingenuity surpassed strict routine. The Yorktown approach was born. Any ship that floats can be salvaged. This feat also broadcast American industrial prowess to the world. The people who repaired Yorktown in 72 hours symbolized those who would assemble Liberty ships in 4 days, produce B-24 bombers in 63 minutes, and ultimately develop the atomic bomb within 3 years. Recognition after the war. In 1985, the Pearl Harbor repairmen reunited with Yorktown crew at the anniversary in Hawaii. Lewis Walters, the electrician who wired for 72 hours, met Tom Lee, a gunner who depended on those lines for his station. "Your wiring saved me," Lee told him. "When we took our first bomb, primary power was lost, but your backup cables kept my guns alive." Walters answered, "We worked knowing someone's son would depend on every seam, every wire, every patch." Admiral Nimitz's judgment. After the conflict, Admiral Nimitz delivered the conclusive judgment. The 3 days Yorktown spent in drydock might have been the most crucial of the Pacific campaign. Not solely for the repair, as remarkable as it was, but for what it exemplified. The mobilization of American democracy, total commitment from its workforce, and unleashed industrial strength. The Japanese approached Midway prepared to confront their vision of America: slow, weak, fractured. Instead, they encountered the real America: fast, resilient, unified. Yorktown's presence was the evidence. They recognized a vessel they thought crippled now as intact. When Japanese aviators saw Yorktown's planes overhead, it signified more than aircraft. It embodied American resolve. They caught a glimpse of the future, one in which industrial capacity and human mettle conquered any obstacle. The repair crew didn't merely patch up a ship. They showed the world a national trait that would secure victory. In those 3 days, Pearl Harbor workers proved that in America, impossible is just another job left to finish. The statistics that mark victory. The final tally confirms the unyielding numbers. Investment: 72 working hours, 1,400 laborers, $2.2 million in supplies, 3 days diverted from other assignments. Return: 1 confirmed Japanese carrier destroyed by Yorktown's air group, 2 Japanese air raids absorbed, 322 Japanese aircraft shot down during the battle, 57 Japanese service members killed. Complete erasure of Japanese attack potential. Demonstration: American repair speed outstripped Japanese estimates by 3,000%. Adoption of rapid repair doctrines. Creation of new standards for damage management. Spur to accelerated industrial output across the United States. The enduring mystery for the Japanese. One issue persisted. How did the Americans know to repair Yorktown in record time? How did they anticipate Midway would occur on June 4? Decades would pass before it became known that American codebreakers were reading Japanese transmissions in real time. Even in ignorance of the codebreaking, Yorktown's presence at exactly the right instance should have told all. The Americans comprehended their strategy completely. Contemporary legacy. Today, the U.S. Navy upholds the Yorktown lesson. Swiftness surpasses perfection. Flexibility outweighs elaborate planning. The adversary won't pause for perfect repairs. Rapid restoration now forms the core of modern Navy repair doctrine, tracing directly to Yorktown's 3-day refit. Every sailor hears the story. Every damage control specialist learns the standard. Captain Buckmaster's conclusion. Yorktown's captain gave perhaps the most fitting remark. The Japanese wanted us to abide by their standards how repairs should be timed. But we are Americans. We make our own rules. Our formula was clear. Yorktown will fight at Midway. The Pearl Harbor crew did not achieve a miracle. They practiced American industrial democracy. Chaotic, pragmatic, flawed, but unstoppable. They restored my ship by any means required. The result wasn't elegant or conventional, but it was ready. When we left port on May 30th, Yorktown was no longer as she had been before Coral Sea. She was reimagined. Part original, part makeshift, part resolute. She represented America itself, damaged, yes, unbroken, absolutely, patched but still battling. At Midway, the Japanese faced more than 3 carriers. They faced American determination solidified in steel, all stemming from 72 hours in a dry dock where the impossible became destined. Conclusion. The lesson learned from those 3 days. The USS Yorktown now lies 16,650 feet beneath the surface of the Pacific Ocean, found by Robert Ballard in 1998. The vessel sits upright, with evidence of battle damage still apparent. The repairs made at Pearl Harbor remain visible. There are welded steel plates, holes crudely but effectively patched, unsightly yet essential fixes that enabled her to arrive at Midway. At Pearl Harbor, a sign at Dry Dock No. 1 states, "Here, in 72 hours, American workers did the impossible, fixing USS Yorktown for the Battle of Midway." Their efforts altered history. The Japanese had awakened a sleeping giant at Pearl Harbor. At Midway, they saw what the giant could accomplish when truly roused. Perform the impossible, succeed at the unimaginable, appear where none expected. Lieutenant Commander Tanub, who delivered the fatal blow to Yorktown, realized too late what he had encountered. We believed we were battling ships and aircraft. In truth, we were combating an idea that nothing is impossible for those unwilling to accept impossibility. The laborers who accomplished the miraculous repair stayed nameless for the most part. No medals were given for welding, no honors for relaying cable, and no fame for sealing breaches. They resumed their jobs, restoring other vessels, and helping win the war one repair after another. Still, their 72 hours altered the course of events. By showing Yorktown could be restored in 3 days, they demonstrated that Americans could achieve anything. Sending a patched-up carrier to Midway conveyed a message globally. The power of American industry was not only in what it could create. It was found in its resolve, its creativity, and an absolute refusal to concede. The presence of Yorktown at Midway constituted more than an element of surprise. It was evidence that, in the arsenal of democracy, the greatest strength was not the bomb or the bullet. It was the American laborer armed with a welder and 3 days in which to achieve miracles. And they succeeded. The narrative of Yorktown's recovery stands as an everlasting testament to what people can achieve together with a shared goal. In only 72 hours, those workers did more than fix a ship. They showed that resourcefulness and drive can overcome every barrier, that practicality outweighs outward appearance, and that tomorrow's conflicts count more than yesterday's rules. The Japanese officers surprised to see Yorktown at Midway saw more than just a repaired vessel. They saw what was to come, a future where industrial democracy would win out over military aristocracy, where innovation would overcome unbending doctrine, where workers' dedication would surpass forced labor. The Yorktown sank on June 7, 1942, but the ideals she embodied rose up and influenced the rest of the war. Every swift repair, every unachievable deadline reached, every challenge solved by inventiveness rather than routine. Traced back to those 3 days in May when 1,400 American workers showed that impossible was only a beginning. The ghost ship that unsettled Japanese airmen at Midway was not mystical. It was considerably more formidable. It was the proof that American democracy, at full strength, could accomplish all things. Those workers did not realize they were shaping history. They simply knew their task and that they had 3 days to finish it. Within that time, they accomplished more than restoring an aircraft carrier. They confirmed a conviction that would sustain America through the war and after. United free people can accomplish what seems impossible. That belief, fastened into iron and sent out to sea, played a key part in shifting the course of history at Midway. It still endures as America's hidden strength, not simply advanced tools or immense wealth, but the faith that any issue can be overcome with sufficient effort, ingenuity, and urgency. The Japanese failed to understand this until it was too late. They counted time in months, but the Americans measured it by hours. They sought flawlessness while the Americans aimed for triumph. They abided by conventions, but Americans acted out of need. Ultimately, 3 days in a repair dock determined the Pacific's outcome. 3 days proved that democracy's arsenal drew its power not only from its resources or its ideals separately, but from the union of both. Free individuals chose to do the impossible and did so.